A philosopher looking at all this today might say that underneath the claims of feminists lie the ideological foundations for the destruction of all gender boundaries and ideas, and they would be correct. But we're not philosophers, we're Christians. And from the perspective of God's Word, we would argue something else. There is a spirit underneath the claims of feminists that rears its head over and over again throughout time. It's the same spirit that led Eve to overcome her husband. Same spirit that led Jezebel to dominate Ahab. Same spirit that wreaks gender havoc on society today whenever it's unleashed by our foolish pretensions for the gain of equality under the guise of egalitarianism and our rejection of God's good and preserving boundaries. Isaiah chapter 4. The desperate condition and judgment on the daughters of Zion. Now pay attention to this and see if you think this is fascinating, given what we know now. Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1 says, "And 7 women shall take hold of one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Just only let us be called by your name and take away our reproach." So the context here is, to go back to Isaiah chapter 3 to get the full context, which is God's judgment on rebellious women. They will have few men to choose from. Men are not necessary? Okay, well, let's see how it works out for you. Isaiah chapter 3, starting at verse 16, this is prophecy of the Lord's judgment. The Lord said, "Because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks, glancing wantonly with their eyes, mincing along as they go, tinkling with their feet, therefore the Lord will strike with a scab." Seductive, in other words. "Therefore the Lord will strike with a scab the heads of the daughters of Zion. The Lord will lay bare their secret parts." In that day, the Lord will take away the finery of their anklets, and the headbands, and the crescents, and the pendants, and the bracelets, and the scarves, and the headdresses, and the armlets, the sashes, the perfume boxes, and the amulets, the signet rings, and nose rings, the festal robes, the mantles, the cloaks, and the handbags, the mirrors, the linen garments, the turbans, and the veils. Instead of perfume, there will be rottenness, and instead of a belt, a rope, instead of well-set hair, baldness, and instead of a rich robe, a skirt of sackcloth, and branding instead of beauty. Now here, verses 25 and 26 are where we want to really pay attention. "Your men shall fall by the sword, and your mighty men in battle, and her gates shall lament and mourn. Empty she shall sit on the ground." So to help you out here, a cross-reference we have is Jeremiah 15, verse 8. Same thing. "I have made their widows more in number than the sand of the seas, have brought against the mothers of young men a destroyer at noonday. I have made anguish and terror fall upon them suddenly." Let's see, we have verse 25 here. No, so Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1. 7 women chasing after one man to take away my reproach among men. This is shame. The words express in almost the strongest form in this culture the feeling of maternity, how important it was in this culture. To have no children in this culture was misfortune. It was assumed to be misfortune. It seemed to imply some secret sin which God was punishing. And so you have Rachel's cry of Genesis 31, give me children or else I die. Hannah, bitterness of soul when her adversary provoked her to make her fret in 1 Samuel chapter 1. But there in Isaiah 3, verse 25, so many men shall fall by the sword that 7 women would chase after one man. And they'll be so desperate for marriage that they wouldn't even expect a man to provide for them. They'll eat their own food, they said. They'll wear their own clothes. They were so desperate that it would be enough to simply take the name of any available man as a husband so that it would take away the shame. And in that day, this meant great struggle and even just difficulty surviving. And so God has a design for marriage. He doesn't bring his judgment on people without a purpose. And as we sit here today looking back on this text, how fortunate are we to have all the truth in our hands right before us. There are benefits of marriage for a woman. And I say for a woman because that's our focus on this. It was feminism. There are clearly benefits for a man as well. It's the servant relationship, serving one another. 2 direct applications can come from Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1 here. It's not good for a woman to be too hasty or desperate to marry. You don't want to marry too fast. You don't want to get involved unwisely or for the wrong reasons. But also, and more specific for our context here, the context of feminism's sad, inevitable result, it's not good for a young woman to fall under the spell of the culture and to reject God's design for marriage and a man's unique ability to provide for sustenance, protection, and to give care. And a faithful man to provide love.